Hey, you guys, welcome back. Ken Karsmizki is with me today, and we're talking about Lewis and Clark and why there is such a lack of proof that they were actually here, even though everything that we read and everything that we've seen, it's like I said earlier, it's like they were there, but it's not necessarily provable that, or there's not that much that proves that, and you're challenging that.
Yeah. In fact, it's sort of like if you think of crime scene investigation, and if somebody said, well, someone was killed, the first thing you'd say is, where's the body? Where's the gun? Where's the evidence? And, you know, you could also say, are you sure that Lewis and Clark came out here? No evidence.
Right.
And so the question is, if their stuff, their maps, their latitudes, their journals are giving you clues and miscues, they can send you off in the wrong direction. How do you go about looking? And the first thing, and it's very simple when you look at the Columbia, for instance. If you thought of the Columbia that Lewis and Clark went down and came back up, the level of the river would be here. Today, the level is up here because of the dams built. And so what that means is if you looked at the Columbia Gorge, that 50 or 60 mile stretch, there's really only one site that isn't underwater. That's Rock Fort. Everything else has been essentially submerged under these reservoirs. So you can put on your dive gear and look for Lewis and Clark, or take the obvious. Go to Lewis and Clark's Rock Fort.
And where exactly is the Rock Fort? I mean, modern day.
Modern day, if you're in the Dalles, there's an underpass which is called the Union Street Underpass, and that essentially leads you one block away from the downtown 2nd Street, which is the Dalles Main Street. A block away, you're at the Columbia River, and about a block down the river is where Rock Fort is. It's about 15 acres of public property. Wasco County owns 10 acres of it. Bureau of Reclamation owns another 5 acres. So it's in public hands, and it actually has been in public hands since the 1970s. And so that's good. That's good from the standpoint that it wasn't built upon. That may be how you lose a lot of Lewis and Clark sites. There's a Kmart there, or there's some office building there. So what you're looking for is a site that isn't underwater, a site that hasn't been built on, and then what you're trying to do is, say, take that gorge, that 50 or 60 miles, and see if you can't narrow that down into something that's maybe 10 acres. 10 acres is doable. And so that's what we did. The way we did that, and I was really lucky, I got NASA to help.
Yeah, this is the part that blows my mind. NASA.
Yeah, NASA.
How on earth did you get NASA to help?
Well, it's so funny because I'm just some guy out there doing research, and my phone rings, and somebody on the other end says, "This is NASA, and we understand you're doing Lewis and Clark research. Can we help?" And I thought, whatever you're offering, I'm taking. and at that point, I didn't know what it was. What it actually was is they turned on 4 satellites for me over the Dalles so that they could use sensors to make maps, essentially photographic maps of the Dalles now, of Rock Fort now. And they could do it with different sensors. And then what they could do is take that Lewis and Clark map, or a small piece of that Lewis and Clark map that showed the Rock Fort site, and see how close that was to real life. Because NASA is getting it down to the minute, just a gnat's hair.
Yeah.
I mean, they can do it. And so the question is, are Lewis and Clark's maps really off, or are there a lot of things that match up? What matched up was Mill Creek coming out, essentially the bank of the Columbia River. And so you could see that you're able to say, well, with pretty good certainty, that 10 acres very well could be it. And at that point, you still have the problem of 10 acres. How do you find somebody in 10 acres? Again, we have great technology. What we used was ground-penetrating radar. What we could do is look through the surface and try to see if we could find any evidence that we could then target. because if you could dig a few holes instead of trying to dig up 10 acres, that was a more efficient way of doing it. So that's what we did. We essentially used ground penetrating radar.
Okay.
After that, what we could do, we received a permit, we were able to punch holes. And these holes are about like that, but we could put them down a line every 15 feet apart.
And this is all on that 10-acre parcel?
This is all on that 10-acre part. In fact, what we did is we could take that 10 acres and we could move it into 3 depressions, because what they describe is that they are in what Clark says is an artificial fort. What he's describing is natural rock walls that form sort of fort walls that gives them protection. They could hide behind that, rest their rifle on there if they were attacked. And that was really important because they believed they were going to be attacked here. They had heard, in fact, they didn't need guides, but they did need interpreters. And the interpreters said, these people, the Indians down here, Wasco, Wishram, don't like us. We're Nez Perce. They're going to kill us. They're going to kill you as well. So could we leave before this happens? And that's basically what happened. The day that Lewis and Clark, the first night that Lewis and Clark spent here, the Nez Perce interpreters left. But what they wanted to do is get a high outcrop of rocks so they're above the river and enclosed. So we could look for 3 depressions, look at each one of those. The one that most local people felt was the site, we put 36 holes in there. If they were in there, because it was a systematic grid, if they were there, we would have found them. We went to a second area, they weren't there. We went to a third area, we started coming up with things. And that's where it really got interesting.
All right, well, and we're going to talk about that. And when we come back, you're going to hear all about it. So stick with us. We'll be right back here on Localite.